Good morning. My name is Paul Charles, and I just wanted to discuss someone who I see as very courageous. In fact, maybe the most courageous man of the last few years. His name is Jordan Peterson, and the reason I see him as so courageous is because he was willing to take on really his peer group, if I can. They're in the intellectual and education sections of Toronto first, but he really becomes a lightning rod for an argument that's really been going on for quite some time. And the wrestling of this argument essentially is leftism, to use more or less the term that he's using, versus what is right, not what is right in the sense of what's true, but what is right in the sense politically. And he's not a conservative. I think slowly but surely he's being forced into that thinking just because of those he is, ends up in debates with. There's always people on the left. And some of them are liberals. They're not leftists, so to speak, but they've been compromised, if you will, by, the thinking of the left, which is really starting to just take over liberalism as a whole. I think it's going to take a beating because, the main Westerner, main thinker is starting to see what the fruit of that is. All you need to do is go to, a little trip to Frisco, or even read about what's going on in San Francisco, as the left really is damaging itself, because the fruit of it is starting to come together. So I think Peterson was extremely brave. He was extremely brave because he's a critic from the inside. And when you're a critic from the inside, you're going to get pushback from your peers, the people that are around you. And there's no doubt he is getting pushback at an extreme level. Now, in fact, it's really become a gauntlet, if you will. When he starts this, by the way, he's got no backing. He doesn't have even, for the most part, friends backing him. I think there were some of his students that were believers, so to speak. But outside of that, he has no support. He has no support in the psychological world publicly. Now, he's mentioned that several times there have been those that have come to tell him, hey, look, I'm an educator, I'm in the university system, but I can't say a word or I'll be destroyed. Peterson knew that they were going to go after him in an absolute vicious way. He understood this, and yet he did it anyway. It's kind of the charge of the Light Brigade, or Pickett's charge, if you would, where it just looks like, from the perspective of anybody of understanding, this is suicidal. Now, if it works, it pays off, but there's almost 0% chance it works. Doesn't matter to him. And he knew, because of the way he's, the debate and argument that he's making, that it's just going to harm him professionally. I mean, there's almost no chance it doesn't harm him professionally. And it has at some level. But he didn't care. I mean, he's like the leader of Pickett's church. He's like Pickett, so to speak, who gets these orders like, charge the impossible situation. And his orders don't come from outside. They come from his understanding of how the Western world works and its successes, as opposed to what you have in really communism, if you will. It's not just socialism. It's got a deeper basis than just socialism. It's a communistic philosophy that is infiltrating everything. And it's really made it to the top, so to speak, of our media, of our entertainment industry, both films, TV, and also in the area of music. And it's suicidal for you, almost, if you're on that, as part of that, and you make any statements, unless you're really, really big, then you can maybe get away with it. I know that, that we've had some recently that have stepped out, Easy being one of them, who was willing to step out, and it's actually paid off for him, because he really, really has this, this album that he just came out with, and he does really, really well with it. I think it's best ever. In fact, it's one of the best selling ever. But he took a pretty good chance of doing it. But he was at a place where he could pull this off, whereas that's not where Jordan Peterson starts. And then you see him, these various interviews, and he's an unassuming man. You may not see it as that immediately, but he really is an unassuming man, and he thinks through everything. The Kathy Newman interview, I think, was one of those that bumped him a whole nother level, because everything about that interview was to destroy Jordan Peterson. She was there to take him out. He's so far ahead of her because, see, he understands manipulation. I mean, he's been dealing with that for many, many years. He studied it. He understands that, perspective. And so she's trying to manipulate him into a spot. And he continually says, see, let me back up for a second. Interviewers do something where they try to back you into a corner. And they do it in such a way because they talk nice that they, can manipulate you into a place to actually agreeing with stuff you don't agree with, but you're wanting to be respectful, if you will. And so you'll kind of let some of these phrases go. He won't allow it. He keeps saying, that's not what I'm saying, or some form of that. No, that's not what I'm saying. Stops her, even in the mid-sentence if he needs to, and backs up and then lays out what he is saying. So, he may say a fact. She turns that fact around into, well, what you're saying is this is good. And he says, that's not what I'm saying. I'm stating this as a fact. And he ends up verbally manipulating her into a corner where she literally, he even makes a statement, gotcha. And this is to her benefit, really. Instead of, arguing with them, she says, you did get me. Now, she gets all kinds of flack for that. I actually think that was a good thing. So the other thing is, when he's in the monk debate, he's about to take on Michael Eric Dyson and this gal from the New York Times. And he doesn't even really have a guy in his corner, so to speak, even though, the one guy was fighting, for free speech. And, but here's how you've won a debate. This doesn't get any clearer than this in my mind. First of all, when one side doesn't answer the actual questions, and that Michael Eric Dyson never answers the questions. He just doesn't. He goes around them. When he hits them with, well, what percentage am I white privileged? He has no answer. He so doesn't have an answer for that he doesn't even address it. Just goes around it. And then he calls him a name. You're a mean, mad white man. Now that works in Michael Eric Dyson's world, because that's how they see Jordan Peterson. He's just this white, mad man whose power is being stripped away from. That's how he sees it. So in his world, it's okay. But in a debate world, when you don't answer questions and then secondly, call people names, because that's exactly what he does, calls them names. You've lost the debate. It's over. It's over. So when I look at that, I look at Peterson, where he's come from. But man, when he didn't have any of the backing that he did today. When he comes out, they went after him, and they've not stopped. But by the way, they're not going to stop with trying to destroy this guy. I think what they're really hoping to do is that they're going to kind of paint him into a corner, and he's eventually just going to become, nobody. But if that doesn't happen, they're going to look for those weaknesses. It doesn't matter if they have to destroy his family or whatever. They're going to look for those weaknesses. And that's what happened, I believe, with that professor who recently was talking about, his family, Peterson's family, lived with this particular professor's family. And if you look at those arguments he makes in there, he never proves anything. He throws out these little side notes. Well, he could have meant this, or he might be doing this, or whatever, trying to psychoanalyze Peterson. And it just doesn't work, doesn't fly. But that's what they're going after. Just watch. They're going to try and destroy this man's life. Thank you so much for watching.